Welcome to High Capacity, the podcast that helps you expand your nervous system's capacity so you can have the career and the family and the goals and actually enjoy them. I'm your host, Michelle Grosser. I'm a trial attorney turned nervous system strategist. If your life is full by every measure and your nervous system is feeling it, this is your show. Every Tuesday, I'm here to unpack the nervous system science behind why you feel wired, overwhelmed, and depleted, and give you real tools to actually do something about it. Let's dive in. Hey, you're listening to High Capacity. I'm Michelle Grosser. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is just this question of like, what am I waiting for? Because I know there are things that I feel like I'm waiting for, but I'm not putting a ton of intention behind them to actually realize the thing that I'm waiting for. And as I've been thinking about it, one of the things that I had been waiting for a long time, especially I would say maybe like 2010-ish, until really like 5 or 6 years ago, is that my life felt really, really, really full. And I kept waiting for it to slow down. Okay. And maybe you've been waiting for that too. The easier chapter, right? The version of life where our kids sleep through the night, or they sleep in the morning past like 5 a.m., or when the schedule slows down, or after, the holidays, or once the school year ends, right? We're in that kind of transition right now, or we expect summer to feel different, or like once I get through this, big project at work, or once I get more help, or once I like, and for me, a lot of times it was just like this big thing that was looming, right? Let's say, when I had my law practice and I had a case that was taking up a ton of time, maybe we were preparing it for trial, or maybe I had a really difficult, demanding client, right? And then I tell myself these stories, well, once I just settle that case, right? Or once we go to trial and I'm done with it, or once I close this deal, or once I get more help around the house, or the kids are older, or get through this busy season, or whatever it is, right? But what I know about that story, and I know this because I lived it for years, is that easier, slower version of my life, like it never actually came. Because what would happen is that, I would settle the big case that was taking up so much of my bandwidth. And then lo and behold, it's like that void was just a vacuum and it was filled before I ever had time to kind of recharge and be ready for it, right? Another case would come along. Or it's like, once my kids get through this, when they were little, it's like, once they stop teething, then I'm going to be able to do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, then the next thing just comes up, right? It's like, oh, once, we go on that vacation, I'm really going to be able to rest and come back. And it's like, no, you go on the vacation and it's awesome and you make great memories. But like that takes a lot and you come back and you're still tired. And then it's like, whatever the next big thing is, right? You guys know what I'm talking about. We wait for this like thing to pass that we think is going to make life so much easier and different after it's done. But there's always something else there. And I want to talk today a little bit about that and what to do with that. And not so much in a like, hey, we need to just clear our calendars and lower our expectations and, accept the chaos kind of way, because I think there's another option. I think a lot of times what we hear about is like, okay, you need to do less, or you need to just like be okay with how tired you are. And I refuse to accept that. I think there's a third option, and it's a third option that I'm really passionate about because I think we're not given it. We were not taught about it. We don't see it. It's hard to see that sort of forest through the trees when you're in it, because we don't know it really exists. And it's what I want to talk about today. It's about what it actually looks like to stop waiting for life to get slower or easier, and instead starting to build the capacity to handle a full life. Okay. There's a science behind this. I'm not just going to give you like these pie in the sky, like just, fix your mindset kind of stuff. I actually want to walk you through the framework that I use inside of my programs. And I'm really excited because we're starting the first cohort of the capacity method on June 15th. And registration enrollment is open right now. And for those of you who are like nodding along and you're like, yeah, I get that. I'm in that season too. And it's like, I keep telling myself after this or after that, it's going to get easier. And then, here I am back again in that same place. I want to give you some information about what's inside and how this works. So if it feels like it's for you, you can jump on and join us this summer. So when I think back, in 2022, I was running a busy Miami law practice. I was parenting 2 young kids. I was running this coaching business and the podcast, which was growing like crazy. And at that time, Jeff and I had kind of fallen into, if you will, this church planting experience, right? We had left the church we were going to. We didn't really find anything else in Miami around us that felt like the right fit for our family and the season we were in, especially spiritually. So one afternoon, we're like, what if we just like started gathering in our living room on Sunday mornings? And, lo and behold, it's like 5 people showed up and then 10 people showed up. And then the next thing we know, there's 100 people inside our house. And it's crazy. But that was a season that felt really full. And it also felt insane in real life. And every single week was a lot. Every single month was more. And I kept telling myself that it was going to slow down and it was just a season. And once we got through this stretch, right, once we hired the right people, once the church got more established, once the kids were in, this particular phase or out of this particular phase, that life was going to get easier. I was going to feel more rested. I was going to have more bandwidth. But that's not what happened, right? Surprise, surprise. It's like the school year ended and summer began, and summer with 2 kids is not a slower season. And, the case at work settled, but 2 new ones landed on my desk. And yeah, we hired help, and somehow the mental load just expanded to fill any space that I'd created. And the church grew, which meant more people, which meant more needs, which meant more Sunday mornings that started at, 5 a.m. and ended at 4 p.m. And that slower, more restful, easier version of my life. Like I just finally saw like that's a pipe dream, Michelle. Like that's not coming. And at some point I had to really sit with that because I was exhausted in a way that sleep it just wasn't cutting it. I was starting to get snappy and irritable and, I would fall asleep. Like I was so tired. I would just crash out, but then I'd be up at 2, 3 a.m. running the next day's to-do list and I couldn't fall back asleep. And I felt like I was just going through the motions of a life that I'd worked so flipping hard to build, but I wasn't like, forget actually feeling any of it. I wasn't enjoying much of it. Okay. And I realized that I had 2 options, or at least that's what I saw in front of me. Option 1 was to just start quitting stuff, like close the law firm or take fewer cases or step back from the church or scale down the coaching business, just like the ways that I could make my life smaller so it fit inside the capacity that I had. And then option 2, as I was seeing it at this time, was like, just keep going, right? Keep pushing, stay overwhelmed and accept that this is just what my life looks like, right? And try to manage it the best that I can. But as you're hearing me talking about this, it's like neither of those is really sustainable. Neither of those felt right. And I really started looking for this third option. And I started asking myself like, hey, is there another way? Like instead of just shrinking my life or just being stuck in constant overwhelm, what if I could just get better at this? Like, what if I could actually not be stressed out? Like I see other people that are living really full lives, probably even fuller than mine, right? What if I was able to like figure out what was going on there and in my biology, right? Because there's both. It's like the things on the outside and then it's the things on the inside. What if I was able to expand my nervous system's capacity to be able to hold all of the things that were going on in my life, right? What if the problem wasn't actually what was on my calendar, but the problem was that my nervous system had never been given the tools to actually hold it without it feeling really stressful? And that question changed everything for me. And it's the question that the capacity method is built on. So I think if you understand the mechanism, right? If you get really curious about what's actually happening in your nervous system when it feels like life is too much and you're never going to get it done and you're overwhelmed and you don't have enough help and, all of that stuff. If you can get curious about what's going on in your nervous system when you feel that way, it really reframes everything. So in the nervous system space, whatever that is, the concept is called the window of tolerance. So our nervous system has a range, right? It has a window, a zone where we can function. We can think really clearly and we make good decisions and we can be present and feel regulated and access joy and curiosity and empathy and compassion and all of these beautiful things. And inside that window, when we're in that zone, life feels pretty good, right? It can feel really full, but it feels manageable. It doesn't mean that everything's perfect. It doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's like, hey, I'm within the zone where I can handle what's coming up in my life and it's not stressing me out and overwhelming me. But when our demands or the demands of our life exceed that capacity, too much coming in, right? Stress accumulates, the faucet's running, the drain is blocked, you get pushed beyond the edge of that window of tolerance. And when that happens, from a nervous system perspective, we go into one of two directions. So we either go up into like hyper arousal. So what does that look like? It looks like anxiety, irritability. It's really hard to slow down and rest, even if we like carve out time for rest. It looks like us snapping really easily over small things. It looks like that feeling of being wired and tired. I lived in that for decades. My body was so exhausted, but my brain just wouldn't shut off. It's such a frustrating place to be. It's that like low hum of urgency that's just kind of following you everywhere. That's one direction. Or the other direction is we kind of shut down, hypoarousal, okay? The numbness, the going through the motions, the exhaustion that we just can't shake, feeling like we're physically present around the dinner table, in the morning, in the evening, like wherever it is, but mentally we're just so checked out. We're somewhere else entirely. Maybe it's that sense that like you've been building all of this for so long, right? All these beautiful things you have in your life, but you're not really like inhabiting any of it. And most of the women that I tend to attract and work with often swing between both of those. So it's like one day we're feeling really wired and then crashed. And then the next day we feel really activated and then kind of numb. And then we feel like we're snapping at people and just really irritable and edgy, but then we're kind of collapsing. And that window, that range where we function well, it just keeps getting narrower and narrower. It's a hard word to say. More narrow. And here's what I want you to hear is that the goal of nervous system work isn't that we just feel calm all the time, right? Like I wasn't expecting my full life to just be like Zen and I'm just like deep breathing in the car before I go into the meeting. And, my kids are fighting all around me and the TV's going and I'm just, sitting in the morning doing my breath work. Like, give me a break. What I don't want that kind of calm life. That means that I'm probably detached from reality in some sense. I want to be able to access that calm in certain moments, right? But what I really want is I want a wider window of tolerance. And those are two completely different goals. Being calm and then being resilient are two different goals, and they actually require two different solutions. So, I think having a calm Zen life or experience requires some of our circumstances to change, right? It's like, well, it's hard for me to be calm and Zen when the kids are loud. That would have to change. And my job would have to be less demanding. And I'd probably have to work with no humans because humans are challenging. And, my schedule would have to be less full and the world would just have to be like a lot less a lot. Okay. And that's not really what I'm after. But if I'm after a wider window of tolerance, that actually requires me to change. So there's a level of accountability there that's actually kind of intimidating. But y'all, that's where the power lies. Okay. That's how we become empowered. It's on us. And specifically, our nervous system's capacity to hold what's coming at it requires us to change, not the people around us, not our jobs, not our relationships, not the house we live in or how clean or dirty it is. Us, our nervous system, our bandwidth, how resilient and flexible our nervous system can be. And here's why that matters is because I don't know about you, but for me, the circumstances that were causing my life to feel full and stressful and overwhelming, they weren't going to become dramatically calmer anytime soon, right? Like I needed to keep the lights on at the law firm because I had a mortgage to pay and I had bills to pay. Like my kids weren't going anywhere. I wasn't shipping them off for like 6 months to boarding school. Like that's just not the life we're living, right? They're around and I love it. And yeah, it feels like a lot sometimes, but that's it. They're not going anywhere, right? They're still young. I had a full, ambitious, demanding life, and you probably do too. And it's not going away. But my window of tolerance, holy moly, did I learn how to expand that. And it's not like aspirational, wishful thinking. It's actually it's rooted in neuroscience. You can learn how to do this and the entire premise of the capacity method. Okay. So something that I think is really important to understand when we talk about this is the way in which our nervous system is taking in information, right? The input it's receiving and the messages that it's sending in our body. So our nervous system is constantly scanning our environment, our internal cues, and basically assessing how safe we are. Okay. That's like, we're really going to distill it. That's the number one priority of our nervous system. Figure out what's going on around me and then make sure that I can handle it and stay safe and alive. So our nervous system is taking messages from our brain and sending those messages, down to our body. And then our nervous system is also taking cues from our body and sending those messages up to our brain. So there's communication going in both directions, top down and bottom up. Okay. Here's what's so important and really fascinating about this. 80% of your nervous system, you guys, 80% runs from the body, originates in the body's cues, and sends those messages up toward the brain. 80%. Okay. What does that mean? That means that only 20%, the remainder, runs in the other direction. So the messages your body is sending are 4 times as influential as what's going on in your mind. So just let that, sink in for a second. 4 times, it's like a 4-to-1 tug of war. And this is just your anatomy. It's the wellness philosophy. It's not a mindset concept. This is just how your nervous system is actually built. And the reason why this matters is that not everything, most of the things that the women who come to me have already tried to feel better, most of the other programs out there, teachers out there, if you're doing talk therapy, journaling, mindset work, positive thinking, cognitive reframes, productivity systems, trying to be more organized or disciplined or have better routines or more willpower, like all of that stuff is top-down work, right? That's all stuff happening in your brain, in your mind. Is it important? 100%. But it's going from the brain down to the body, which means that's only 20% of the messaging happening in your system. So if you've been working so hard on being more productive and more organized and optimizing your routines and working really hard on like your mindset and being positive and disciplined and all that stuff, kudos, love that for you. But if you're still not feeling much better, it's because you're neglecting 80% of the messaging that's going on in your body, that's originating in your body, taking cues from your body and sending signals of safety or lack thereof up to your brain. Okay. So it's not that any of these like mindset top-down things are wrong. They're not. They're useful, right? They have a role, but they're downstream, working on the symptoms, not addressing the source. So if that feels true for you, you've probably been trying to solve what's actually a nervous system problem with all of these brain-based solutions. And you've probably been getting partial results or results that like you can feel some momentum building, but then you slide back into your old ways and how you were feeling, right? And it's because you've been working with the 20% of the equation, but wondering why you can't get 100% of the results. And it's why you know the things you probably need to do or should be doing and still not be able to do it. It's super frustrating. And it's why you can have complete insight on your patterns. Like the women that come to me, they're so smart and they're self-aware, but they've been going to therapy for years and they can explain to me why they do the things they do, right? This is why I do this when my husband does that. This is why I shrink when I'm in the conference room or having a conversation or having a pitch to someone because this is what happened to me in my childhood, or, this is how my parents were. So this is why I feel this way, or I'm a people pleaser because, this way, like they can understand and put all the puzzles together and clearly see why they do some of the things they do and yet still feel the same way and run the old patterns and get so frustrated, even though they're telling themselves like, man, I know better. Why do I still do this? Okay. It's why the morning routine works for a while and then it kind of falls apart, or why, this new system that you hired someone to help you figure out worked until it didn't, right? Mindset shifts. Yeah, it's like helpful in the moment. Okay, maybe that's a new way to approach this, but it kind of wears off a few days later. And it's not because you're not trying hard enough. It's because you've just been working from the wrong direction, or at least you've been neglecting a large part of what's happening in your biology. And it's that a capacity actually expands from the bottom up, right? We have to work body to brain, work with that 80%. We call that the afferent nervous system, cues from the body and sending the messages up to the brain. And that's what I want to teach you how to do. Okay. So let's talk about what that looks like in practice. Because I think one of the reasons nervous system work can feel really woo-woo or vague or overwhelming is you're like, yeah, cool. I know I need to regulate my nervous system, but like what in the world? Like, where do I start? How do I do this? I don't have time for like, an hour-long meditation in the morning. Like I can't even sit still that long. Okay. But what I want to give you is like, hey, here's where you start. Here's where you go next. And here's how this builds. So inside the capacity method, what I teach, I call it the SPACE framework, SPACE. Okay. And that's an acronym. It stands for S for C, and then P for practice, A for awaken, C for construct, and E for embody. So I want to just take a couple minutes and walk you through what each phase does and means, because honestly, when I explain this to people so often, what I get is like, oh, like that's really different from things that I've tried before. And it works. So let me show you why this sequence matters. So I think a lot of the other teachers and programs out there kind of start at the C, that construct. Okay. They're like, hey, here's what to do differently. Here's a new habit. Here's a new system. Here's a routine. Here's how to set better boundaries. I love all of that, but we're missing like the seeing and the practicing and the awakening. And we're just like giving the tools. Okay. You can't expand what you don't see or understand. And most women are out here trying to change all these behaviors without understanding what's actually going on, what's driving it beneath the surface. So that's really where we start. So in the capacity method, phase 1 is called C, and it's weeks 1 and 2. And we're really going deep in like the nervous system, which is your container, right? How do we expand that? We cover how your nervous system actually works. So you're going to get like nervous system 101, the circuits of your nervous system, all about the window of tolerance, why flexibility and resilience are actually what we're building, not just this like feeling of calm all the time. And we look at the nervous system ladder. We talk about how activation builds, and when it does, how capacity shrinks, and how we can start intervening sooner, right? Before we're already like over the limit and we're losing it. We feel awful. And in week 1, I think most women tell me so much changes for them because they really start to understand the difference between regulating your nervous system and expanding your capacity. Because when I talk about regulation, or even just like when I think about it and other people talking about it, when you see all the people on like Instagram or, wherever else, other podcasts you listen to, and they talk about, here's 3 ways to regulate your nervous system. I love that. And those are helpful. And I teach those too. But all they're teaching you is how to come back to your current baseline. Okay. So if like, this is my baseline and this is where I feel okay, and I feel like I'm really anxious or stressed out or angry or irritable today or overwhelmed, and I use these tools and it brings me back to my current baseline, cool. Like that's a win. And that'll get us, through the day. So maybe those are things like, a physiological sigh. I love teaching that. Cold water on your face, how to activate your vagus nerve, movement, breath work, all the tools that you use when you're activated to help you come back down. Okay. And regulation, coming back to that baseline, is essential. And I use those types of tools every day, and I want to teach them to you also. And that kind of work, just coming back to your current baseline, if that's what regulation feels like, I want to tell you lovingly, that's not enough. Okay? Because what if you could actually learn to raise the baseline itself? And that's the difference between, feeling better for the next 20 minutes and actually being different in 3 months. Okay? And the capacity method intentionally does both. So most programs only do the regulation part. They give you the tools to manage in the moment, but they don't teach you how to build the capacity to hold more life. So that's week 1. And then week 2 in the capacity method is we look at what it looks like for you. So what are your 4 different stress responses that's kind of like your go-to, right? Is it fight? Is it flight? Is it freeze? Is it fawn? How do they show up in your real life? Not as these abstract like psychology ideas, but specific patterns. How are they showing up at work? How are they showing up at home? How are they showing up in your relationships, in your body? And we have an eliminating overwhelm workshop. It's one of our live calls where we use weekly planning actually as a nervous system tool, not just to be more productive, but I want to help you learn how to reverse engineer how you want to feel and show up. It's like capacity math. Okay. So that's week 2. And then, so that's phase 1, seeing. And then in our space framework, phase 2 is the P, it's practice. So that's weeks 3 and 4. This is where we really start to get into the body. Okay. Your body's signal system. So we work on interoception. That's your body's ability to actually like notice what your body is saying. Okay. And for most of us who've been so taught to like live in our head and push through and get things done and don't rest, and like we are, our skill level ability to notice the signals of our body, right? Our interoception skills are genuinely so underdeveloped. And it's not because there's anything wrong with them, right? It's just that we've been rewarded by so many people, and I think just culture and society at large. We've been rewarded for a lifetime of overriding our body's cues, right? We just push through. Hey, just keep going. Hey, there's no time to be tired, right? We're not going to complain here. There's no sleeping in. And the skill of actually tuning into your body, noticing what your body is saying before it has to like scream so loud and shut us down and we have a big old mental breakdown. It's a skill we build intentionally. Okay, so we cover a lot of that in week 3. And we also cover completing the stress cycle in week 3. And this is one of those concepts that when women hear it, they immediately understand why they feel as heavy as they do, because stress is a physiological process. And we know that the stress cycle in our body, it has a beginning and a middle and an end. And our body's actually designed to activate in response to a stressor, right? We respond to the stressor. Let's say we're going to see, our young kid is like walking towards a busy street, right? We want our body to get activated and be in fight or flight so we can run, right? So that's the beginning and the middle, and save our kid and bring them out of the street. And then our body has to complete that cycle, discharge the activation, come back and recover. But most of us don't know how to do that, right? We don't know how to let that happen. So the stressful email comes in and the adrenaline spikes and we keep working through it, or the hard conversation happens and cortisol is flooding our body and we just, move on to the next thing, or the day ends and all of that activation from the day is still in our body. And we just like go to happy hour, have a glass of wine, scroll on our phones until we just crash. And what happens is that the stress is activating over and over and over all day long, but none of that's actually ever completing its cycle. And every time we have an activation that doesn't complete, those incomplete stress cycles in our bodies, they actually accumulate, okay? They sit in our body, they sit in our tissues, they sit in our nervous system, and it's like layer on layer on layer, day over day, until what we're carrying isn't just like, it's not just today's stress, right? It's months of stress, maybe years, maybe even decades of stress that was never given a chance to complete its cycle. And that accumulated incomplete stress is one of the biggest hidden capacity drains that I see. But once you understand it and you understand why it feels like so much and why you feel so activated, even though there's like nothing actively wrong right now, right? That's like a big aha moment. And then in week 4, we really talk about how you're wired. So like neuroception, why your nervous system sees the world through the lens of your history, how co-regulation works, the biology of why certain people can really give you a lot of energy and feel really good and expand your capacity, or other people can like shrink and drain your energy and contract your capacity, and what it means. And, especially when we can't always choose who we're in the room with, right? And then our second live coaching call together, we're going to create your nervous system map. So every single woman in that room is going to leave with a personalized map of their own nervous system and what each state feels like in your body, what triggers the states, what helps to shift it, and then practical tools that you can use for the rest of the program and beyond. And then we go into phase 3. So we did S, C, P, practice, and then phase 3 is awaken, the A. So that's weeks 5 and 6 inside the program. And, by this time, you're learning your nervous system, you're building out your toolkit. Then we take a look at what's been running on autopilot, right? The subconscious patterns. So in week 5, we talk about your stress response in action. We take a look at whether it's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we really look at how those responses have been showing up in your real life, in your parenting, in your relationships, in your work, in your body. And something shifts when you stop just seeing your patterns as like something that's frustrating or embarrassing, or that's like, oh man, that's a character flaw, right? Or it's like we have shame around it. What if we flip that lens? This is what we do. And we start seeing those things not as problems, but actually as solutions. These are just strategies that your nervous system has adapted and built to keep you safe. So it's not an excuse, but it's actually a starting point for actually starting to change them, because we cannot change what we're judging. Like nothing changes from a place of judgment. I can promise you that. Okay. Most women have been judging themselves for their patterns for years, and you wonder why things aren't changing. Okay. We approach this from such a different angle, and it makes such a difference. And then in week 5, it also includes one of my favorite pieces of the whole curriculum, which is the shift from all of these things, these old patterns running automatically beneath our awareness, to getting really intentional about it. Okay. How do we get the same need met in a way that actually expands our capacity instead of draining it? Because the need we have underneath these patterns we're running they're legitimate, right? Our fight response is trying to protect us, or, your people-pleasing fawn response, it's trying to keep the peace. Your kind of procrastinating freeze response, that's trying to like prevent you from feeling overwhelmed or get started on something that feels really uncertain or you might be embarrassed by. Like those are real needs. And the capacity method doesn't just like tell you to stop having needs, right? I want to show you how to meet them differently. And in our third live call, that's really what we dig into. Like we take a look at your coping strategies for stress and overwhelm, how they're showing up somatically and in practice. And we look at like, hey, how's that been serving you, right? How has the overworking or the perfectionism or the people pleasing or the withdrawing or, the emotional outbursts, how's that been serving you, right? And then like, how's that been holding you back? How do we engage with these tools with a little more intention and some boundaries and parameters so that they serve us so much better rather than just like defaulting and automatically running on autopilot? Like that's a game changer. And then we get into phase 4, which is the C, construct. Okay. And this is 3 weeks, weeks 7, 8, and 9. And this is where the whole new structure gets built. We have all this great foundation we've just laid, and now we get to build upon it. So in week 7, it's all about emotional regulation and emotional capacity. The core teaching here is like, I just want you to understand so much more about your emotions, that they're not the problem. They're not things that we have to manage. They're actually physiological events. I want to teach you what happens in your body when you feel flooded and how to move through it. And the goal isn't like, I just want to feel less. It's actually the opposite. I want to train your nervous system to build enough capacity that you can feel mostly anything without being hijacked by what you're feeling, right? Rage doesn't take over. Anger doesn't take over. Frustration, sadness, like that stuff doesn't take over. You can feel it and be present with it and be okay. So we cover what's actually happening when you're feeling those big emotional feelings, right? Why managing them doesn't actually work, what metabolizing actually looks like. And we work at the edge. Like this is how you stay with discomfort just long enough to expand your window. And that right there, that's the actual mechanism of emotional capacity growth. It's not avoiding the hard stuff, bypassing it, suppressing it, repressing it, being consumed by it. None of that. Can you learn to stay with these emotions just long enough to build capacity? And then in week 8, we talk about what we're protecting. Okay. And this is where our values really come in. Core values as a nervous system tool. I am here for it. And I think that's the thing most people don't tell you about either boundaries or even like decision fatigue. Every decision that's misaligned with your core values is going to shrink your capacity, not just like mentally, but physiologically as well. Your body knows when you're saying yes to something that costs you something real. And over time, that misalignment is a massive capacity drain. That's actually one of the biggest drivers of burnout that I see. So in week 8, we get really clear about like, hey, what are we protecting here, right? Everything that comes after this is built on solid ground that feels really aligned. And we do an emotional capacity workshop. That's our 4th live call. And we go deep. Okay. We talk about how emotions were modeled in our families of origin growing up. Like, what do we do with emotions now? What do our husband or kids do with emotions? How do we actually express these big, like anger, frustration, disappointment, rage? Like, how do we express that in a healthy way that is not harmful to us or the people around us, right? What does emotional capacity actually look like in a regulated nervous system? So powerful. And then finally, we start to wind it down with week 9 is capacity architecture. And we talk about boundaries, okay? Because we've talked about how to set a foundation where we can set and hold boundaries in our body, right? Where we can do that without folding. We talk about what our core values are. Like, how can you set boundaries if you don't know what you're protecting? If you don't know what you value, how can you set a boundary to protect it? Okay. So after we've done that, then we can start to talk about boundaries in a way that actually makes sense. Because boundaries, the way I teach it, boundaries are not rules that we enforce on other people. Okay. A boundary is not like, you can't, email me after 6 p.m. That's not a boundary. Boundaries are decisions that you make about your own nervous system. So every yes you say, right? Every no, every decision, every thought, every action is a boundary. And now that you know what you're protecting, because we went through your values and you're building your energy, you're building that window of tolerance, you can decide what's actually worth the cost. So it's not about becoming, rigid and going off the grid and unavailable, but it's about being more intentional and knowing that the trade-off you're making when you say yes to something, and then just choosing. Okay. So boundaries are deep in week 9. And then in week 10, that's the last week, the last phase. And it's the E in space in that framework. And the E stands for embody. And this is it's the most rewarding week to facilitate, because by week 10, every woman in the room is different. And it's not because they've achieved this thing and have this new certificate to put on their wall, or it's not because they pushed through and I'm so much more disciplined and motivated now. I'm up leveling. It's not any of that. It's because they've expanded, and the conversation shifts from hey, here's what we're going to do to whoa, look at this new identity that we're cultivating, right? Look at this woman that you're becoming. It's all about the becoming. So we work through some mindset frameworks here. We talk about how our nervous system operates in each of them. And then we have, a lot of reflection on what is our capacity now versus when we started, right? And what's next? And how do we go deeper and continue in this work so that we don't backslide? And how do we make this sustainable? And it's so rewarding. It's so awesome. And then the last thing I want to tell you about the capacity method, before I invite you to jump in, is inside of the capacity method, I've created a somatic practice library. So this is like a playlist, think of it, of somatic tools. One of the things I hear most from women who've tried nervous system work is that they just don't know which tools to use when and how, I don't know which one actually is going to work for me, right? And that's fair. Maybe you've tried breath work and you're yeah, that felt actually really uncomfortable and I didn't like that particular way we did things. Or, you're oh yeah, my friend meditates, or I saw this chick on Instagram and she meditates and I wanted to try that, but my brain won't stop, right? Or you tried movement and it didn't help, or, whatever it is. In the somatic practice library, inside of the capacity method, I have 40 practices that are organized across 5 different categories. So there's breath work, there's movement and shaking, there's grounding and orienting, there's touch, there's sound, all these different ones. And the goal is not that you do all 40 of those exercises. The goal is that through the 10 weeks together, you're going to be able to get curious and experiment with different practices so that by week 10, when you're wrapping up the program, you have 3, 4, 5 somatic tools that are your go-tos. You're like, my nervous system actually responds to these. These actually help me shift states. And that's so valuable, right? You know what works for you and you take it with you. So those of you who attended Wednesday's capacity audit last week, was a workshop that we did a state shifting like routine together at the beginning, right? We did some movement, we did some breathing, and people's activation levels moved. Like everyone in the chat was like, oh my gosh, I came in at like a 10 on the stress level and I was just feeling really activated and stressed and a lot of, tension in my body and overwhelmed. And then after 10 minutes, they're like, wow, I came all the way down from like a 10 to a 3. That's wild, you guys. And that's just like one practice that we did together. But imagine having 3 or 4 of those that works for your specific nervous system that you can pull from when you're in traffic, when your kid's having a meltdown, before you have, a big meeting in the parking lot, before you walk into work or into your home, like at midnight when your brain won't stop. All of those moments where you need to reach for something because you either need to down-regulate or up-regulate, you're going to have that and you're going to practice it in the somatic practice library. Okay. All right. This is so exciting. This is like the whole game plan. So everything that we talked about here today, that window of tolerance, the 80-20 direction of the messaging in our nervous system, right? 80% originating in the body and sending messages up to the brain. The difference between just regulating our nervous system and continuing to come back down to baseline, or actually raising the baseline and expanding what our nervous system can handle. The state shifters, all those somatic practices, that's the map. Okay. Knowing that, listening to this episode, awesome. I'm so glad you did. But the reality is that awareness alone doesn't expand capacity, right? Awareness alone doesn't regulate our nervous system, because if it did, right, we'd all just have perfectly regulated nervous systems because we've read the books and we've listened to the podcast and we've, gathered the information. And I think the most important thing I could tell you right now is that you can understand your nervous system perfectly. And by perfectly, I mean like teach classes on it like I do, and still feel that pull of dysregulation, on a Tuesday afternoon, because your nervous system doesn't change because you understand it better. It changes because you work with it consistently, right? You actually take the action repeatedly over time in these small little increments that feel safe enough to your nervous system until new patterns become the default. And that requires a container. It requires structure. It requires support, or maybe requires is a strong word. It's so much easier and more efficient with structure and support. Okay. With someone in your corner who can help you apply this to your specific life and your circumstances and your patterns and your nervous system. And that's what the capacity method is. So it's 10 weeks together. We start on the week of June 15th. And then we have live calls together on Zoom every other week. We end, I think it's August 20th is the last call. So around the end of August, you have access to all of the curriculum, which is pre-recorded and available on demand. So you can listen to it wherever works for you, in the car, in the pickup line, while you're folding laundry, what have you. And it really makes all the difference. You have that somatic practice library. This is the first time that this particular program, the capacity method, has been offered, which means that this opening group, I'm keeping it small by design, which means you're going to get a level of access to me in live calls in our private community. You're going to get direct feedback and coaching on your specific patterns that aren't going to exist once I start to scale this. So the founding cohort pricing is also the lowest it's ever going to be offered at. Registration closes tomorrow. So that's Tuesday, the 9th. Okay. Registration closes. Man, jump in. If you're feeling the call for this. We start June 15th. If something today just clicked for you, if you've been waiting for the right time and something in you starting to realize, like, I'm probably going to be waiting a long time if I'm waiting for the right time, right? That's not coming on its own. If you're thinking, I don't have enough time or I'm too overwhelmed, could it be that that's the exact reason why you're listening to this right now, right? This is exactly what you need. And if you're curious, you can head on over to michellegrosser.com/TCM for the capacity method. I'll put the link in the show notes for you guys. Go check it out, read about it. If you have any questions, shoot me an email, hello@michellegrosser.com. I am responding to every single email. If you have a question, I want to get back to you and help you get the information that you need to decide if this is where you're going to put your attention this summer, right? If this is a summer, you're actually going to do something about how you've been feeling. And then come back tomorrow. If you're listening to this in real time on Monday the 8th, I'm going to release one more episode tomorrow where I just want to talk to you about what peace actually looks and feels like, and why your life has very likely just outgrown the capacity of your current nervous system, and why, it feels like a problem, but it's actually just an invitation to graduate, right? To expand, to go to the next level. And I think that's going to be really helpful too. All right. You feeling that full body? Yes. Go ahead, check it out, jump in. I would so love to spend this summer with you. The group of women who are already coming through, the way this group is shaping up is just really, really exciting to me. And I think it might be a really good fit for you. So consider it. Go check it out. If you're enroll by the time registration closes on tomorrow on June 9th. And I would so love to see you inside. All right. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks for listening. I love y'all. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.